Shalom and greetings from Jerusalem, Jane. I just came back from the post office. It's windy, it's raining throughout all of Israel, I believe, or most part of Israel. And that describes very well how we are all feeling inside. This is a day of mourning. This is a day of deep devastation and sorrow and darkness here in Israel, as the Israeli Defense Forces has to announce the death of 10 soldiers. 10 soldiers in one day inside the Gaza Strip. Absolutely heartbreaking. That takes the death toll to 115 soldiers killed inside Gaza since the beginning of this war against ISIS Hamas. What happened yesterday is just a quick summary, but what happened yesterday is the Golani Brigade was working together with the armor and engineering forces carrying out search operation in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and they thought that that area was abandoned, but they literally walked into an ambush. 4 soldiers went into a building complex, a civilian building complex. They found a tunnel shaft, but they were terrorists, and they fired at them, and they were throwing explosive devices at them, and they killed those 4 soldiers. When soldiers surrounding that area couldn't get a hold of them on the radio, they knew that something horrible had happened, and they quickly, the troops stationed around, communicated together, and they went in from different fronts to rescue these soldiers because they were afraid that either Hamas had killed them and would take their bodies and, taking them down to the tunnels, or they had been kidnapped alive and taken down to the tunnels. So immediately these soldiers came in for a rescue mission, but they were met with gunfire. They were met with more explosive devices and bombs detonating, throwing at them. So in total, 9 soldiers were killed, 2 senior commanders and several officers yesterday. This is the biggest casualty in one day here in Israel. So I am, just like the rest of the country, absolutely heartbroken. I am sending my deepest condolences to the families of these soldiers, the wives, the children, the parents that now has to bury their beloved husband, father, and son, as they gave their life defending the Jewish homeland against evil ISIS Hamas. Just before that happened yesterday, it was announced on the news, or the Israeli Defense Forces went out with an announcement that the Israeli Defense Forces had rescued the bodies. They had rescued the bodies of 2 dead hostages, Eden and Siv. Eden, a beautiful young girl, was kidnapped at Nova Music Festival on October 7. She was kidnapped alive, dragged into the Gaza Strip. Siv immediately went out to fight these evil terrorists when they attacked Israel on October 7. He was killed on that day, but they took his body into the Gaza Strip. And yesterday, some of the Israeli Defense Forces, their soldiers, found these bodies down in the tunnels. And they were, of course, brought to Israel and for identifications. So yesterday, their families were notified that we are sorry, but your loved one was found, their bodies were found. Of course, she was murdered in Gaza. She was kidnapped, taken into Gaza alive, and Hamas murdered her inside the Gaza Strip. So this is just so heartbreaking. Every day when I watch the news, there are more testimonies coming from family members of people still being hostages inside the Gaza Strip, or people who lost someone. You have to remember, whole families were wiped out. Whole families were burned alive. Whole families was executed with their hands stripped tied on their back and just executed. It's just, every time we feel like, now we have heard the last of it, more news is coming out. And again, I'm sorry for being a little bit graphic, but it is absolutely outrageous that Israel has to go out to all of those Israel-hating people who hated Israel anyway. And they are the ones saying the sexual assault didn't happen, the rapes didn't happen. Why? Because Hamas denies it. So you take the words of these satanic devils who committed these atrocities, who filmed it themselves, so we just jump on the wave and we say they don't happen. So Israel has to go out and provide proof. And I saw an article about one of the Saka people who was out. These were the one who came in first and who found these bodies. And he said, we found a young lady, her undergarments were gone, and these terrorists had raped her and jammed a knife into her vagina. Another one, they had shot her up in her private parts. It's so evil, you can't even imagine what happened. Whole families executed. Families who's lost mom and dad and 3 children are back, or parents lost their children. I was speaking to some Danish people last night, and I said, there's not one family in this country that's not affected. You just don't understand the impact of all of this, of all the people who has lost a loved one, and many families have lost more than a loved one. And then there are the whole families who has been wiped out and they have lost their homes. It's just devastating. And many of the people who is now fighting in the army, they lost loved one. There's no time to mourn. They were sent straight into war. And then some of them were killed, and now they are coming home to be buried. So there is one word that describes the feeling here in Israel right now, and that's grief, sorrow, mourning throughout the whole country. It's just unbelievable. And when we think about the people who was rescued, the hostages that came out, what they had to endure, physical violence, sexual violence, starvation, no bath for 2 months, barely any food, the children being told, if you're too loud, we're gonna kill you. And then there are still hostages inside the Gaza Strip. And what does the United Nations do? They go out again yesterday in a non-binding vote. They go out and they vote for an immediate ceasefire inside the Gaza Strip out of concern for the civilians inside Gaza. It is so sick. I cannot find the word. Shame, shame, shame on you. Shame on every single country, your country, wherever you're voting, your government who voted for that. A ceasefire right now means, okay, Hamas win. They committed all of these atrocities and these terrorists are now allowed to be alive. So Israel will continue to have that threat right on their doorstep. So what did the Israeli ambassador Gilad Erdan do yesterday when he was speaking in the United Nations before they had this vote? He said, well, it's very easy. There is a simple solution. You want a ceasefire? Okay, look at this. Here he is. And he's holding up a sign. And he says, this is the phone number to Hamas inside Gaza. And he read out loud the phone number. He says, call this number and ask for Sinwar. And you tell him this is the United Nations. We want an immediate ceasefire. So now we demand, lay down your weapons. Surrender. Every single one of you, surrender. Release the hostages. And this war is over. So is that what they're doing in the thumbs up for Gilad Erdan. So is that what they're doing in the United Nations? No. Now Israel is enough. Enough is enough. You have done enough. So they're more concerned about the civilians inside the Gaza Strip. Let me tell you something about the civilians inside the Gaza Strip. Many of them are 100% behind Hamas and supporting Hamas, like we have seen with some of the hospitals in there. We have seen with some of the doctors. Where are some of the released hostages held? With private people. They might be private, but they are certainly not innocent civilians. These are white-collar Hamas sympathizers, Hamas helpers. And the rest of the civilians in Gaza, what did they do? For the 10 years that I have lived here, when Hamas was firing rocket into Israel, they were cheering on. They were happy when we had terror attacks in Israel and another Jew was murdered. Who was handing out sweets in Gaza and celebrating? The civilians inside the Gaza Strip. But now they are suffering because Israel is saying enough is enough. We need to eradicate Hamas once and for all. And by the way, no army in war has done more, because Israel is not at war with the civilians. They make it clear all the time. Israel is going after the terrorists, even though they know a lot of the civilians was helping them. But Israel has given numerous options to the civilians to evacuate. This is where you need to go. This is where you need to go. Israel brought food, incubators, waters into the people in the hospitals. No other army has done more to avoid civilian casualties like the IDF. And yet they are being slammed. And now the world is screaming about a ceasefire instead of letting Israel finish and say, you know what? This brutal, demonic army, ISIS, Hamas, we understand completely. You need to eradicate them. Israel can't have a ceasefire now and say that's it, and then have Hamas with their capabilities of attacking Israel again, and they are still firing rockets. We have had red alerts even today. So shame, shame, shame on every single country who voted in favor for this ceasefire right now inside the Gaza Strip. Like I said, it's very easy. If you want a ceasefire, contact Hamas and say surrender. Lay down your weapons, surrender, release the hostages, and all of this is over. Completely over. So for such a time as this, we pray with Israel. 10 families now has to have a funeral for their loved one who was killed in one day inside the Gaza Strip. Israel took out 250 terror targets inside the Gaza Strip yesterday in the last 24 hours alone. By the way, that's what everybody should be talking about. That's what the United Nations should be talking about. That's what foreign media should be talking about, mainstream media. Their focus is on Gaza, yes, but they are on the civilians. They should be focusing on, look what the IDF is presenting every day. They have bombed, was it 22,000 terror sites inside the Gaza Strip? Is it 900 tunnels? How many thousands and thousands of weapons have they found inside mosques, schools, UNRWA schools, private homes? That's where the focus should be. That's what mainstream media should report about, saying, goodness gracious, Hamas turned the Gaza Strip into one huge terrorist site. And even in, they're finding weapons in children's bedroom. That's where the focus, and people should say, holy smoly, we absolutely understand the IDF. They need to finish this once and for all, so there would be peace for people living in Israel, and that the good civilians inside the Gaza Strip could be liberated from Hamas, who is also not good to them. We saw videos of Hamas stealing the trucks that is coming into the Gaza Strip. They are hijacking the trucks. So yes, there is a lot of good people in Gaza also who don't support Hamas. But this is war. This is war, and Israel needs to finish what Israel started. It's just, there is no other option. And then when that happens, we will see how is Gaza going to be rebuilt and how is things going to be. But as of now, Israel has to eradicate evil ISIS Hamas, who is still able to kill our soldiers and to fire rockets into Israel up until this minute. So that was just a little update from me. I think I'm going to go and have some hot tea coming in from the rain and the cold. For such a time as this, united we stand with Israel. Bye.